Hey everyone, welcome. My name is Megan Van Wart and I'm the owner of Paint at VT, and this class is Painting with Megan. I hope you're having a great week. If not, this is really good time for you to hit the reset button, which we all need more often than we want, right? Finding a little bit of time for yourself to create something, to practice art, and really just to kind of be in the moment and do something fun. In today's class, we're painting a beautiful little fall latte scene with a couple of really beautiful leaves and a small cup, a mug with a fun little latte design on top. I've been inspired to paint one of these like latte designs for such a long time. And sometimes you just gotta do what you wanna do, right? We have to make the time, we make choices, right, of what we wanna paint. So this is gonna be a really fun one, perfect for fall. I'm also going to try to add like a cozy sweater texture in the background that everything's going to be on. I'm not sure how it's going to go, but in these classes I love to experiment, and that's one of the fun things about art is just being courageous. And sometimes it's really scary, but that's why you're here, right? Because you want a little bit of structure and you want a little bit of guidance when you paint something. So you're in good hands. If you're not already a member of our Patreon artist community, be sure to go check that out. Some of you may already be members, but if not, I want to encourage you to join to be a part of this special place. So the supplies that you'll need for today are a cup of water to rinse your brushes, a small plate to mix colors, something to paint on. I'm painting on 11 by 14 canvas paper today, or acrylic paper. Love it. Goes in a frame easily. And you can figure out what medium you want to paint with. So I'm using acrylic paints today. Another class in the future, I may use watercolors. A lot of my classes are acrylics, but you can always choose what mediums you want to use. If you wanted to try painting with watercolors, you could easily join one of my classes and paint with watercolors, okay? So it's always nice to know that. If you really want to mix it up, you can follow along, but just use a different medium. I'm also using a pencil today. I'm going to do a little bit of light sketching. So if you want to follow along, you can. I'm going to do a little bit of light sketching on where I want my leaves to be, where I want my mug to be, and then where I might add some like sweater-like detail in the background. All right. So if you have any questions throughout this class, you're welcome to comment below and I'll coach you and support you along the way. If you already are excited about this class, be sure to give me some love, like or hit the love button below just to show your support. But we'll go ahead and jump right in. You'll need an array of brushes, small to large sizes. Nothing fancy is needed for this class, so just use whatever brushes you have on hand, but I'll show you what I use along the way for reference. So the first thing I'm going to do as I jump into this class is I'm going to do the round area of where I want to put my mug first. So this is a fun part. We can go look around your house and find a round object that you might want to trace as a mug. So I'm going to look around. Let's see here. Ooh, this is quite perfect. So take a minute, pause the video, go find something round in your home. I found this cute candle topper. I love it when things just work out. This is like the most perfect size for a mug, for the round top of a mug. So the perspective that we're doing for this class is we're looking down on the top of this mug. And I want this, it's not going to be quite in the middle, but might be a little higher. And I'm going to center it, and I'm going to use my pencil and just draw right around it. And this is going to give me a beautiful round object. It's going to help a little bit, right? Look at that. Amazing. So I have a little bit of a round object. This will be my mug. And I'll put my little latte inside. Okay? So go grab a round object, put on a mug, and this is just really will boost your confidence in getting started. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start to draw a leaf. So the inspiration today was from a photograph that I saw, and there's a leaf up here in the corner. And this leaf is kind of a maple leaf, and the corner of it is kind of off the top. So I'm going to draw a line. This is the long part of the leaf, and I'll bring this a little closer so you can see it. Sometimes in these classes I use, you can see the line a little bit better here. Sometimes in these classes I use a Sharpie. Today I'm not going to do that because I want nice and light colors. But I did a little bit of a line here for the center of the stem of the top of the leaf. And this leaf has 5 points. So this is the main point. I'm going to do another point off over here, and I'm just going to connect it. And this is going to help us with some of the structure. And then another part is going to be over here, and this one's going to be a little shorter. So it's kind of like one big one medium size, and then one shorter one over here. If I wanted to make this shorter, I can just erase it a little bit. And I'm going to rinse and repeat. This is a medium size, and then this is a shorter here. So now that you can see this is kind of like the core shape of our leaf, we can kind of do some of the points off of them, which is kind of nice. So maybe this one here, this leaf will come here, and then you can kind of start to do some secondary points. And this is the center of the leaf, so you can see that there's a little bit of spacing around this, and you want the point to kind of come across. So this is the shorter point, and then it's going to connect here. So play with these shapes. And you can do some of those pointy edges of the leaves. So just take a few minutes here to play. And I'm using these lines as like that stem, that vein in the middle. So the line, the exterior line of the leaf is going to kind of, you're going to have padding. It's not going to touch that straight line. This is like the vein of the leaf. And then you're going to want to come out, maybe add a couple points as you kind of visually build this leaf. And this leaf is off the page. I did that intentionally. And then maybe the mug. Handle will be over here. So you can see I can play with the mug handle detail as well. So this is just a little bit of a handle for the mug. And you want this to be nice and straight. And I can always play with that too. So take a few minutes. In this class, I always want you to pause the video and take your time. But I did a nice leaf up here. I'm going to do the same thing down here. So I'm going to actually take my canvas and I'm going to flip it upside down. Pause the video if you need to, but I'm going to do another leaf over here. And I might tuck in another little one. I like to have this nice and well balanced, so I might do a leaf here. Maybe this leaf will be totally on, and I'll tuck in another leaf over here. So you're just going to start with that long line. This will help get the structure. Bring this up a little bit. The long line, and then you're going to do, that's the long, and then you do a medium. And it all connects, and then you do a short. And you can have a little bit of grace. You want these two to kind of be matching. These can be a little shorter. And then you can go jump right into the tips. You can kind of play with the tips a little bit, add some kind of fun edging. You can always change the shape of your leaf. Maybe they need to be a little wider. You can always change the shape. You can always pull up another picture of a leaf on like YouTube or like Google if you want to. But getting the points of these leaves in will really help bring them to life. And making the edges of your leaves a little unnatural, like a little bit of like a jagged edge in some cases, will really make it look more natural. And we'll kind of mix up these lines a little bit. If you don't want them to be so straight, we can kind of erase some of them. You can also add in some of these like veins to the leaf here to make it look a little natural. We'll do a lot more of this with paint, but I'm just showing you how we're going to soften these leaf shapes. So I'm just doing a little bit of this detail work just to show you kind of where we're going to go with this, okay? Down here at the bottom of the leaf, you can make it be a little more rounded. I go left and right as I work my way up. And look at the edges. See how they're really, maybe this one's a little longer. You can play with, or a little higher. You can play with the shapes of your leaves while you're using pencil. Okay, so take your time shaping these leaves. If you want them to be totally different, just play with the shapes, pause the video. You can spend as much or as little time here as you wish. So I'm going to flip this back around. You can see my composition is coming together. I may put in, this is where you want to fill in this space with like as much or as little of this like foliage as you wish. I may put in like, I'm going to get a little wild here. I may put in a couple of like rounded leaves just to fill in this space. Maybe I'll just do one or two up here. You don't have to do this if you don't want to. But this is just a little bit of extra something for me to kind of build out this space. I may put in one more leaf like right here. And again, I'm going to probably flip this canvas, but these may have like a nice little vine or vein through them. Again, you don't have to draw all these veins, but I like the texture of the two. It's quite pretty. It's up to you if you want to add these rounded leaves. But as I paint and I draw and I'm sketching the composition, you are noticing that I'm trying to find balance. I have, a couple maple style leaves, and then I have a couple of these softer rounded leaves, because fall is full of lots of different colors and leaves and things. I am inspired just to do a little maple leaf here, so I'm doing kind of one long one and a couple of shorter ones just to see what happens. And I'm doing the points. And you kind of want the leaves to have a little symmetry, which is really tricky, right? But kind of lean back in your chair, be open-minded to the process. Maybe the leaves have a little bit of a rounded bottom to them. You can play with it. I'm not going to go too crazy. I'm just looking for a little symmetry with regards to shape. So I want the little leaves to kind of come out in the same areas. With regards to length and height, that's where you just use your eye and it's just a little bit of patience. If folks don't have a ton of experience drawing and sketching, don't worry. Just do your best. Okay, so I'm going to flip this. And I have the overall composition completed. I may put in like a little bit of a stem here. I don't know. I might put in something else down here, but I might just leave it. But maybe I'll tuck in a little bit of a stem right there, just to kind of ground those leaves on the picture. So for me, I have really beautiful symmetry. I have a leaf at the top, a leaf down here, so 3 maple leaves, big, big, small, and I have some of these rounded leaves. For me, visually, I'm happy with this. I may put in a couple of lines for like a fold in the sweater, just to create a little bit of depth. So for me, I'm gonna have a little bit of shading here. Maybe I'll add a little bit of shading here. So I'm just doing a couple of lines in this corner, just to say this is where I want the folds to be in my sweater. This is kind of like a blanket or something this is on, but I'm just gonna do a couple of folded lines down here. This is just to give me a little bit of structure for where I wanna put a little bit of shaded areas in this space. Maybe I'll just do another one here. So you can see I just did some lines, that's for me where I want to add a little bit of like, not darkness, but a little bit of shaded area, okay? So I have a beautiful sketch happening. The next thing we'll do is if you need to keep drawing this, you can, otherwise we can jump right in. If you haven't yet put in the handle for your coffee cup, take a minute to do that as well. So in the picture, the handle is it's really straight and it comes out horizontally, like right on the side. And then I'm just gonna round this. So nice straight lines. This is the handle for my coffee cup. It's got like a little bit of a secondary line. It kind of comes out just a little bit for that grip. So you can determine where you want that to be. This is a little higher than halfway. If you wanted to put your handle in totally halfway, you could. I think I want mine to be exact halfway, so I'm just gonna take a minute to erase this and just make it right. Sometimes we make choices as artists, whether we do sketching like this or not. Halfway is right about here. And then you could determine the width of your handle. So for me, that's a little bit better. And the handle's a little rounded on the end. There. So for me, that handle looks a little bit better. I'm just gonna roll with that. All right, cool. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna put a really beautiful like beige color in the background. It might have like a little bit of brown tucked in after, but we're gonna just kind of paint the background a nice soft beige, and then we're gonna jump into the leaves and the coffee and the latte. So to make a beige color, I'll flip this back. Perfect. So to make a beige, you're going to grab your plate, and I'm gonna back up just a little bit so you can see the whole canvas. It's going to be a little bit of white on your plate, a little bit of white, a little bit of yellow, and a little bit of orange. And you can put those on your plate in different spaces if you like. So there's a little bit of white. And I'm just using basic acrylic craft paint today. I'm not using any fancy paints. And to make orange, I'm just going to put a tiny touch of red on my plate, but just over here on the side. You're not going to need too much. Okay, and you want to grab a large brush of choice. All right. I usually use like 1/2-inch brushes as my bigger brushes, but you can use anything that you wish in this instance. If you have a bigger brush, you can use a bigger brush. But if you ever received a paint kit from me, I have these 1/2-inch flat tip brushes. So these are great because you kind of manage the control, but if you have a bigger brush, that works too. So before we get started, we always get our brush a little bit wet. And we take a scoop of our white. And I'm going to grab just a little bit of yellow, and we're going to make a light yellow first. And you want to make enough of this so you can kind of like paint the background. So here's a light yellow. And then you're going to grab just a tiny touch of red. I grabbed too much. And it's going to turn orange. So you might need a little bit more yellow. And you want to kind of keep all the paint in one place from preventing it to be like spread around. So a little yellow, and I probably add a little bit more white, and make like a beige color. You want this color to be very light, almost white, but you want it to have just a tinge of color because we don't want it to take away from the picture. This is very orangey. I'm just going to, maybe I'll even bring a little bit of this color into my white. So I really want this to be super light in color. So I just took a little bit of this beige, orangey, it's kind of like a light skin tone color. I am just mixing that in here, and I'm kind of getting this, in person, it's like it's a white, but it has a little touch of this color. For me, this is exactly what I wanted. Okay, so I'm going to take a minute to find a color that you like. Try to go on the lighter side if you can, because all the other objects are going to have darker contrast. So we really want the objects to stand out against the background. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to follow some of these lines. I don't want to cover these lines up, so I might leave these lines showing, but I'm going to paint kind of all around them. And I'm just doing smooth brush strokes. You're going to paint around all these objects that you put on here as well. So we're just filling in the background. Don't paint over those lines. If you added any lines for like shadow textures, you can paint right around them. But just take a few minutes to fill in the background, painting around your objects. And in these classes, I always encourage you to take your time. So if I'm going too fast, just pause the video, take your time. Everyone works at different speeds. And as you get around your leaves, you can use the side of the brush. You can use a smaller brush to dance around. I might go a little faster at this part, so just take your time as you work your way around. The more you paint, the more you get experience with kind of navigating your brush strokes around objects using a single brush. So I'm playing with manipulating and turning my brush kind of dancing around the lines, dancing around the objects. I'm not covering those shadowed lines that I added, just so I know where they are, because I really like the position of them. So I'm being intentional and mindful to leave some of those there. But I'm going to just use the tip of the brush. You can spin that big brush in your hand to have a more fine point. And this is where we're going to be painting the background and going around all those objects that we created. Don't forget to breathe. This time is for you. And this is going to be such a beautiful scene. I absolutely can't wait until it's finished. It's perfect for fall. And you want to go right next to the mug. If you need to grab a smaller brush, feel free. Just get a little more paint. You might need to mix more paint. I probably will. But just take your time. It's okay for colors to be a little bit different. You can see I have a little bit of like some darker tones coming in here. It's okay. And use whatever colors that you like. We just want this background to be nice and light. For mine, it's like a beigey peach color is what it turned out to be, which is fine. You just choose any light color of choice. So if you really don't like the color you picked, let it dry and just know you can paint right over this. That's one of the benefits of using acrylics. Don't get discouraged if you have a color or a shape that you don't like. Just know you can always make modifications along the way, okay? As an artist, you kind of learn and you get to know that part of the process. And it can be really liberating to know, like, I can start somewhere, and then knowing I can change it if I want to is just really energizing, because it allows you to kind of push your own limits and bring in ideas without kind of living in fear you're going to mess it up, because you can change things. Okay? So just know that in all my classes, I'll remind you to be really nice to yourself as you're painting. I'll inspire you to keep going and to try new things. But most importantly, just to be yourself and go at your own pace. That's the most important thing. So I'm just having some fun dancing around all of my shapes. I'm not perfect by any means. All the color isn't totally the same. It's okay. I have a couple of rounded leaves up here. This is my big one. If you need to come back in here after with a smaller brush, you can. I'm just doing as much as possible with this big brush. And then these objects are really going to start to stand out for you, which is a really fun part of this class. So fun. And we're going to do things in steps and layers. So we're doing our background. We'll add some fun texture to the background after. I'm not sure how much texture we'll add. We can keep it simple. I'll let you make that choice as an artist once we get done all the other areas. The texture is like probably a final step on top of this base color based on the amount of time you want to spend on your picture today, on your painting. Just try doing nice smooth brush strokes. If you wanted to use a little water, you can. I use often water in these classes to help with the blending. If you want to dip your brush in a little bit of water, feel free. I haven't done water because this is fairly light and I want good paint coverage. So you can see all of the lines that I left separated for the shading is there. And I like that it's segmented like that. I really do. And I got some small areas in here. So I'm just going to try to wiggle in here with my big brush. If I happen to paint on some of these lines, that's totally okay. We're going to be doing lots of layering, so it's all good. But it's good that we're kind of buzzing through this background because we have lots of painting to do for these leaves and our coffee cup. Okay. So take as long as you need to. Pause the video. But at this point, I'm going to let the background dry. I'm going to look around, maybe take a step back visually to make sure that I have all of the background painted. Now you can see if I bring this up close, it's not perfect. I have some white gaps where my lines are. It's okay. I'm not worried about that. But I want it to dry. I'm going to clean my brush and we're going to move on to the next step. Okay. So we're going to be using a lot of red, orange, yellow, and white today. So bring those paints nice and close by because we're going to be using quite a bit of those. I don't intend to use blue today. We'll see what happens. But you want to have your red and your yellows and your whites for sure. Okay. So next we're going to do our leaves. Leaves are going to be red and dark. These maple leaves are going to be like dark reddish green. Maybe then we're going to lighten them a little bit. Maybe like, I don't want to say like a soft brick color. I haven't decided what color these leaves will be yet. I might make them orange just so they stand out a little bit, like a yellowish orange. Not sure, maybe like a birch leaf, right? So we'll start with these ones up here, the big maple leaves. What we're going to do to start with these is we're going to use a smaller brush. So if you have a brush, you can use like a small flat tip brush like this, or you could use a small round tip brush. You don't want something too small, so if you wanted to grab kind of a medium size, something like this is fine. We want something that has enough bristles on it for good coverage, but we can turn it to have some nice clean areas. So if I get this brush wet, you can see how it has a little bit of a smaller tip on it. That's good. This one too, it has a nice fine tip, like a nice clean edge for some edging. So I'll probably use these two brushes for this next step here. So I'm looking for a soft red color. And on your plate, you're going to definitely need some white if you don't have it already. So I'm just going to put a little bit more white next to my red. And it's not like a pink, but we just got to start somewhere. So I have a little bit of this like peachy color left. What I might do is take a scoop of the red and kind of put it up here and just grab a little dollop of the white and just mix a little bit of this orange with a little bit of this red and white and just see what kind of colors I get. Now this is pretty close. It needs to be a little bit more brown. So who can guess what color we need to add to this to make it a little bit more brown? So red and green makes brown. So since there's already a little bit of yellow, if we add a little tiny touch of blue to this, it will make it a little more brown, like a reddish brown. So watch this. So I have this I added a little bit more yellow. If I put a little tiny bit of blue on my plate, and if you have a brown at home, great, feel free to grab it. But I'm going to do a little tiny dollop of blue. And this is like a blue lake or a nice brilliant blue. Any kind of blue will work for this. You're going to just take a tiny bit. If you add too much brown or too much blue, it will make it purple. But if you add a little bit of blue, it's just going to add a little bit of that coolness. And that's just going to make it a little bit darker for us. And look at that color. It's so beautiful. This is going to be one of the base colors. Now you want this to be dark enough where it stands out. I want you to find a color that you like. So if you wanted to make this a little bit more red, grab a little bit more red. But this is a nice base color for my leaf. It's like that soft, it's like a dark dusty rose kind of. And I'm just going to outline the leaf, and I'm going to use the flat edge of this brush. And you can kind of add a little character as you're outlining this leaf if you wanted to. A little bit of these pointy areas. So start with one leaf. I'm just using the flat side of this brush to outline it. Think about texturing the edge of these leaves. See, I'm doing like little bits of like, I don't want to say sharp pieces, but that makes it look a little bit more natural. And then as you're outlining, again, take your time. I'm going to start up in one area, maybe on the edges. Start filling it in by the edges. And I'm going to do one area first. And then I'm going to put a little water on my brush. And I'm going to use the water to gently fill in the leaf. Now you can be playful here with how you fill in your leaf. But the water will add some lighter areas. So I'm dipping my brush in water. I'm using the water to gently fill in the interior of the leaf. This will give you some softer areas. Get a little bit more water if you wanted to loosen it up a little bit if it's not light enough. I'm just doing soft little brush strokes. And this is a way of filling in the leaf without it just all being one solid color. So you see I'm getting some fun texturing or spotting on the leaf. Sometimes leaves, so the color changes differently, right? So if you're inspired here to make it like a little bit more red, you could easily tuck in a little bit more red in areas. So just tucking in a little bit of red. Experiment here with how you fill in this leaf. This is a little bit more of a red color. With the water wet, you can play with how you fill in this shape. It's kind of like a little bit of a playful watercolor effect. I can still see those veins. I'm going to make those veins darker on this leaf. So if you can still see those pencil lines behind, perfect. If you can't, maybe use a little more water to loosen that up. If you need to blot what you've done to loosen the color, you can. But see how pretty that came out? It's really simple. Maybe we add in a little bit of depth in between some of these. You can be playful with how much, and I'm just using the tip of this brush. Okay. So you're going to rinse and repeat. Find a method that works for you. I'm going to rinse and repeat the same steps, and I'm going to flip this upside down. So take your time. It's okay to like paint a leaf and let it dry and come back to it, because then you can make a kind of round two of modifications. So for me, an object is never done without at least touching it twice. So I'm just doing nice soft edging detail again on this leaf down here. You can see I'm just using the edge of this brush, the flat side of this flat tip brush. And I'm not doing smooth, solid brush strokes. I'm kind of doing textured brush strokes to fill this object in. I did the edging first because I'm going to take a little bit of the paint and I'm going to use water to help fill this in. So I want the edges to stand out just a little bit more. You can draw it down each little leaf. If you have too much paint on your brush, get some of the paint off for this water texturing part. Using my cup, kind of managing how much and paying attention to how much paint is on this brush. You don't need a lot of paint on your brush to fill in these leaves. If you wanted to bring in a little bit of extra red in areas, if you really like this punchy red, you could just do it a little bit on some of the edges, a little dusting of red on the edges. That's really pretty. So you'll get inspired, you'll come up with ideas. Okay. Don't forget to go back and get a little water. We're all using colors all in the same family. I do want to fill in all those little white nooks and crannies. So I'm just gently going around with a little water on my brush since the paint is still wet. Just filling in gently with the tip. I'm paying attention to the tip of the brush for all these details. Making sure I fill in all those nooks and crannies on my canvas. Nice. And I'm going to rinse and repeat. I have 3 of these like maple style leaves. Using just the edge to outlining first. Doing some natural kind of dabbing techniques. Thinking about a natural edge for the leaf line. And I'll bring it nice and close. Okay. If you paint something you don't like, just let it be. And there's lots of tricks and tips on how to like cover things up, and just letting that paint dry without kind of going over it is the best thing you can do. So this leaf looks a little funky. One leaf looks a little different than the other. I may make this a little higher. See how I can easily reshape that? And I'm going to add a little bit of white here. So I easily reshaped this leaf, and I'm going to put red right here anyways, or this pink, but you can see how I easily reshaped it. It also needs to go down a little bit. So you can kind of reshape things as you go. This also needs to be a little bit wider right here, in my opinion. This leaf maybe is a little bit higher. So you can kind of reshape and make some modifications as you paint. It's all good. So I'm going to make this a nice dark edge. I'm going to let that dry, and I'm going to come over to the other side and start filling this in. A little bit of wet paint, and then I'll get my water on my brush to kind of start filling this in a little bit. So a little water on my brush, start to fill this in. This is definitely like a dusty rose in person, so that's where if you wanted to add like a little bit of like the red edging, you could even use your finger to do a little bit of smudging if you wanted to. Anything's possible. You can do red kind of on the underside of one leaf or another. You can be playful there. But I'm going to use a little water and a little bit of this paint to kind of bring it all together. You can make it darker, you can make it lighter, you could bring in more orange. In these classes, I'll always encourage you to kind of do your own thing. This one might have like a little bit of an orange to it. We'll see how it goes. I kind of started running out of one of my colors, so I was transitioning to doing a different color. So it's okay to kind of play around. If you want some lighter areas or darker areas, that's totally fine. This one's a little more solid in color. So this is a really good example of having some like using water to have some lighter spaces. So like I could even tuck some white in here to kind of create some lighter areas again, but having like the lighter and darker areas is a really good thing because it allows your eye to really create some depth properties from these leaves. So just take a few minutes. We're working on just the maple leaves right now. Some of you may have already shifted to do other leaves. If you did some of the other yellowy ones, that's fine. Again, the intent of this step is to just do your maple leaves as a base coat, play with bringing in other colors, do what you're inclined to do, and then we'll come back and we'll do some nice refinements and detail work. If you wanted to take a little bit of red and do like a little bit of outlining with the edge of your brush, you can. Just using the bristles on the edge. This red will give a little bit of a shading effect for your leaves. These leaves have nice points on them, so if you don't have points on your leaves, add a little bit of extra love here. I'm going to let these dry. We'll add some more textures as we go. But feel free to let it dry. If you wanted to come in and add some additional textures, you can. I'm just going to kind of look around and be a little playful for a moment, just playing with what colors I want to add and where. I do like the lighter areas, but I'm going to come back in and make some really more detailed modifications. But I might just let those dry so we can come back to them in a few minutes. So mine are not finished, but they're at least painted in. Just like our background. Let's paint the background and move to the next step. We've painted the base coat of these leaves. We're going to let them dry and we'll come back to them, okay? So finish whatever brush stroke you're on. Make sure you have base colors on these leaves before you move on. I might add a little bit of oranginess on top of these, who knows? I am going to paint these secondary leaves. I'm going to do orange. So I'm doing a scoop of yellow. You may or may not have these secondary leaves. So yellow and a tiny touch of red will give you orange. I'm going to do an orangish yellow, so they're not too crazy. This is like Florida orange, and that is too orange for me. So I'm going to put a little bit of white nearby here, and just find a foliage orange and yellow that you like. Maybe it's like a little yellow with a little orange. Like play with your colors here. I have these two, so I might kind of dabble back and forth. But I'm going to outline each of these leaves. Just like we did. And I'm going to slowly bring a little bit of paint in. And I'm going to use water and paint to fill these in. I am going to see the lines behind these. That's okay. I'm going to use a darker color to bring those lines out. But I just want you to play with filling these leaves in, going around my coffee cup. I'm being intentional. I'm using water here to fill this in just to get some kind of fun texture. You can fill these leaves in any way that you want, as we talked about. I might put a little bit of extra white on my brush just to lighten them, just a touch, but just do what you feel like in this step here. I like that I can see those lines behind. There, base coat. I'm just going to let it sit and I'm going to come back to it. That's as easy as that. I'm just painting them and moving on to these other ones down here. Because once they dry, we can really add a second coat of texture to these leaves. And I'm just going to gently the exterior of these leaves for me is a little darker, the interior is a little lighter. That's just what I'm playing with today. You could do something different if you want to, it doesn't matter. There. So I just have a couple of leaves. I have a couple of stems that you're probably starting to see If you wanted to take like a thin brush to give some of these stems a little bit of structure, you could do a little bit of like a dark red stem for some of these maple leaves if you wanted to. This one goes behind that one, and you can play with how big these are too. It doesn't really matter, but you want to keep them nice and thin there. Okay, so things are coming together. It looks great so far. We can change the colors. You can make them more red, more burgundy, but these are just all base areas to start, okay? And then you can refine and do all the colors as you wish, okay? So the next thing that we'll do is we're gonna do the inside of the latte. For me, this is like a brownish yellow, like a kind of a light caramel color. If you need to pause the video to continue to refining any of these other basic shapes, feel free. But I'm gonna make kind of a caramel, like a light caramel color next. And we're gonna start with, let's make a brown. It's probably a good place to start. So let's make a brown. If you have a brown on hand, feel free to grab that. But if you don't have a brown, I'll make one from scratch with you right now. So yellow and a touch of red will make you orange. So let's make an orange. Looks like I already have an orange over here, but we're gonna make another one. And once you have an orange, orange and blue will make brown. So there's a couple ways of making brown. Red and green will make brown, and blue and orange will also make brown. So since I have no green happening on my plate to mix with red, I have orange, so I can take a corner of a blue. A little bit of blue will go a long way. I'm gonna mix it with my orange. I'm gonna see if I can get a brown color. You can also mix all of your primaries together to get a brown too. This is a little green. So if I have a little bit of a green, what color may I need to get a better brown? Maybe red, right? Red and green make brown. So I grab a little bit more red. So this is just a game of pretending like we're all in kindergarten and we're mixing all the colors together to get the color that we want. Ooh, and look at, I'm getting this like latte color. Look at this, beautiful. So if it's not light like this, and this is all the paint that I need too, this is a perfect latte color. I'm like nervous, but I kind of want it to be a little darker. It's really close. Look at that, beautiful latte color. I want it to be a little darker. So I'm gonna grab a little black and put it just like on the other side of my canvas or my plate, way far away. And if you're very careful, you can use a tiny touch of black, wish me luck, to make it a little darker. Ooh, see, I've got a little darker. You can make these choices, right? All right, I'm gonna start with this color and I'm gonna hope for the best. So I'm making my latte thing here. So the next step is fairly easy. Once you have your coffee or your latte color, we're gonna put a cute little white design inside of this, by the way, once it's dried. Get some of that on your brush. And we're gonna put it inside of our coffee cup. Now I'm gonna flip this back the right way. The coffee cup is gonna have a white ring, okay, all the way around it. So you're gonna start and you're gonna create a buffer for your latte. And you want your buffer to be even. I'm leaving very intentionally. Look how dark this is, it's so fun. I could always lighten this with white paint. You wanna leave a buffer between the edge and be really intentional. You can always make your buffer smaller, but start a little more towards the inside and we're gonna fill in our latte. But you're gonna do your buffer. Try to get it to be even all the way around. It's a little tricky, but you can do it. I know you can, just take your time. You wanna have an edge of your coffee cup. Use your pinky to stabilize your hand. If you need to change the way your canvas is oriented, it's okay to move your canvas around. I'm going to fill my latte in by doing circular brush strokes. Circular brush strokes, so much fun. Rounded brush strokes. Go back and get a little bit more paint. Doesn't this look delicious? We'll create some shading around the cup after. We don't even have our fancy swirl in there or not yet. All right. We're all going to learn how to be baristas in today's class. Awesome. Enjoy the process. This is so therapeutic and relaxing. So that's pretty close. It's not perfect. We're all going to be really critical at this step. Just do your best. Get enough paint on the edge of your brush so you have a nice clean edge for that coffee cup. And some of us might spend a little bit of extra time here, just really getting the edging right. And that's okay. This is like a more precise object compared to things that are like a little less precise. So just do your best. But go nice and slow. Have a little patience. Practice your edging. I'm kind of going back around nice and slowly. Okay. I have like one little corner down here where it's a little more narrow. So everybody's going to see something, right? I might even turn this to see if I can get this edge to come out a little bit more. So it's okay to turn your canvas. This is a great practice of just being a little patient with the form. We're not going to get this just right unless you're determined. This is pretty close. Let me see, I have one edge over here. Okay, so that's not too bad. You can let it dry. Keep working on it if you want to. I may do like a quick second coat in here so it's nice and solid in color since mine was already drying. So I'm just going to do a second coat just so I don't see any brush strokes. Be careful to not go outside of the edges once you have perfected your edging or done your best. Just take your time. You can always use white to cover an area up. So if you wanted to like fix a space, you can always use white to kind of make a modification. So don't worry too much. And then just let it dry. So for me, I'm going to let it dry. I might put a little bit of this this latte color on the handle, but just leaving a little bit of a buffer on the top edge. This just kind of helps match it a little bit. You can do as much here as you want. I have a little bit of a white buffer around each of the edges. And I'm just doing a little bit of a rounded part here. So it just kind of shows you that the handle's there, which is kind of nice. And this is all fairly straight edge here and a straight edge here. So again, you can use, if you have a nice flat tip brush, do a nice flat edge there. So you can see that's where my coffee cup is, right? Because you can see the top of the cup and you can see the handle. If you want the handle to be a different color, totally fine. There is a little bit of like a lighter color on the top side of the handle here. It's like a little bit of a lighter touch. See how it's a little lighter on one side? That's like a little bit of a level 2 detail, but if you wanted to add a little bit of lightness, you can right there on the edge. We're going to do some detailed work on the coffee cup to make the cup stand out as our next step. But get that base coat of your latte in. That's really important. I have an area over here that's kind of like peeping through, so I'm going to like let that dry and come back to it. If you wanted to lighten this and make it more caramel, you can. Now that I'm like pausing and looking back, it looks a little bit like hot cocoa or coffee. So I'm kind of interested in lightening it just a touch. Let me see if I can do that with like a little bit of a softer swirl on top. See if that's possible. So I'm just going to, for me, I'm just going to put a little water and a little paint on my brush. And I'm going to mix this color in just to lighten it. In the picture, it's actually even a little bit more, it's like more yellowy in the picture. But this is just hopefully going to kind of soften the color for me a little bit. And I'm just using water. This design I'm doing right now is not the design in my coffee cup. It's just I'm using this to lighten the color of my coffee. I'm experimenting, and this is such a great way to experiment. If anybody had a darker color like me, you can easily bring in a lighter color, kind of swirl it into your coffee with a little water on your brush to see if it kind of gives you a little bit lighter of an essence. For me, it's kind of working. It lightened it up. I feel like I need a little more yellow. I really like the color. I don't know if I'm going to try to bring a little yellow in. I don't know if it's going to work, but I can try. A little yellow with a little water might give me that lighter golden shade I'm going for. It's not exactly like the inspiration, but it's okay. But for me, I do want it a little bit lighter. So I'm using a little white, a little bit of yellow, and it is lightening it up just a little bit. And I'm kind of getting this darker ring kind of around the exterior, which is kind of helping to kind of create the depth of the coffee. So that happened unintentionally by adding a little bit of a lighter. So if anybody wants to try that, it kind of left me this like darker ring, which kind of is helping my drink essence here. It's still not that light. So I'm just going to, I'd really like to come up with a lighter color. So in this instance, this is a great example of making choices as an artist. Am I going to settle for the color that I have, or am I going to mix a lighter color? For me, I really want it to be lighter. So I am just going to take a minute as a patient artist, and I'm going to make it a little bit lighter. Now, if it's blending into this brown, I'm going to stop because I want this color, and it is blending pretty quickly here. I'm going to have to come back to it once it's dry. I'm going to do smooth brush strokes. I'm going to blend this in to the best of my ability. I'm doing circular rounded brush strokes to have it be blended. I'm using a soft hand to really blend the colors together. Some of that dark ring is fading away a little bit. For me, that's okay. There, for me, it's getting a little lighter, and I'm personally happier with this color. Some of you may have gotten a lighter color initially. I just want it to be a little bit more caramel versus I had the kind of more of a brown. There. Okay, so I'm happier. It's a little lighter. You can see the differences of color with the edging. I'm going to put a little bit of this color right on the top of this handle on the left side just so it matches. There. Okay, I'm gonna let that dry. I'm not gonna touch it. Just gonna make sure this is as smooth as possible and then just let it be. Okay, so our leaves are drying. We are going to let the middle of our coffee cup dry. We are going to do a little bit of detail work on our coffee cup, a little bit of shading work to really make it stand out. But we want to wait to do that until the center of the cup is dry, because we don't want the edge of the cup and the details around the edging to touch the middle of the cup area. So we're going to go back to our red leaves and we can play with some additional detail work there. So for the detailed work for the leaves, I'm going to want you to grab one of the smallest brushes that you have, a nice fine point small brush for some detail work on the veins. And we're also going to add some shaded work on these leaves to make them really stand out. Okay. So the couple of the brushes that I have are, one is a 2 and one is a 2/0 fraction brush. So if you have like a 2/0 fraction brush, a 1 or a 2, those are great choices. You just want brushes that have a nice fine tip on them. And I'm going to make a darker red to do some of the veins, and then we can kind of do some outlining and some shading. So I'm going to grab, I have a little bit of red right here. I just put a little bit of black on my brush, and I'm going to create a little bit of a darker red color. You can decide how dark red you want this to be. This is like a dark cherry red. Just by adding a little bit of black, you can see it changed pretty quickly. This is also going to have quite a bit of contrast on these leaves. So what you're going to do is you can start by playing with some of these veins inside the leaves. Now they don't have to be perfectly straight. You can kind of like bend them a little bit and play with them, but you're going to want to just do a few soft left and right kind of veins. This is just showing a little bit of nature. You can also use this color to kind of outline some of the exterior of the leaf. So this is a really detailed step where you're just going to take your time. Kind of be one with nature in this instance. This is where you're really playing with the natural part, maybe a little bit of dark outlining. I'll bring it a little closer so you can see it. You can do as much or as little this as you like. But I'm paying attention to the tip of the brush only. And I'm alternating from the left to the right side. This is where you can get the tip of these leaves to be really pointy. See that? You need to come in and like change some of these colors. You can also bring in like other little colors at the same time. This is where we're all going to kind of go at our own pace. If you wanted to change bring in any other additional colors to these leaves at this time, you can. If some of these colors are too dark for you, just bring in some lighter colors and just do some accents. Totally fine. The lines can be straight, or they can have a little bit of movement to them. So you can see it was initially straight, but then I'm just doing a little bit of movement. If anyone has access to a leaf and you want to go outside and get one for reference, always amazing using natural references. I always paint my best leaves when I'm looking at a real leaf. And I have the inspiration pulled up right now next to me, so I'm actually looking at a real leaf in a photograph right now. And for me as an artist, it helps visually to have that guidance. I'm using this dark red to outline these leaves as well. That's optional, but it's really going to make them stand out on the painting. So we could easily spend hours just on these leaves. So do as much or as little as you wish here. Okay, I'm going to bring it back just so you can see the detail on how it shows up. So it's really quite pretty. If you need to change brushes, just remind yourself it's okay to change brushes along the way. I'm doing some secondary kind of veins off. So it's up to you on how much or how little you want to do here with regards to this detail work. So just kind of follow your own intuition. I'm not going to do much more than this, just so you know, to these leaves as a little bit of awareness. I am using the tip of this brush to outline these leaves so they really stand out. You can see how that leaf has stood out completely compared to some of these others. So I'm going to do the same detail work on all of these leaves that I did for this. So that one is done enough for right now. I'm just going to flip my canvas upside down. It's more comfortable for me to do these upside down, so it's okay to move your canvas around. I do like doing a little bit of this outlining. It's really satisfying. You can get some of that natural leaf-like edging by doing this outlining. And then I'm going to come in and do, I love that we drew these veins initially. It really kind of helps ground the object on the picture. Some of these veins can be short, some can be long, but they all connect. Like, see this one down here? They all connect at that point, right? It's really important. I'm doing a really gentle hand. There's small lines. I'm alternating from the left to the right. And lean back as you go. I'm kind of painting, having a nice loose hand to like kind of create a natural fall line for the edge of these leaves as I dance my way around. Lean back in your chair and reflect on your work. You may want to make a modification here or there. Sometimes we get so consumed in the work, we kind of forget to pause and just check in on ourselves. Maybe for me, there's like a lot of pink here and there's not enough like contrasting colors. So I'm going to add in a couple of like different colors up here. And I'm just using my finger, but you might want to add in a little like color or two just to kind of like bring it all together. So this leaf on the top needed a little more something something. So you'll just pause and reflect on each kind of part of the leaf as you go here. And these like upward points are really helpful for the texture. So there's like these upward points on these leaves. And try not to have a ton of paint on the brush, so if you have the less paint you have, the more delicate it will look. It takes a lot of practice for this like paint management, how much paint you have on the end of your brush. And I talk about that in these classes because the more we talk about it and create awareness to it, the more in tune you will be to using the tip of your brush, managing how much paint is on the end of your brush, etc. So it's all with practice, all with good times. It takes years to be playful and to identify and be open to different painting techniques. So the more you do it, the more your style will evolve. So just where you are is the best place for you to be. Just embrace the process, enjoy this time for you, and just know that the more you paint, the more your style will evolve. And it's really fun to kind of figure out what you like to paint and doing more of it. In these classes, we do lots of different things. So again, I want to thank you so much for being here, and I hope that you're enjoying our class so far today. Okay, so I'm looking around the edges. Am I happy with the outlining? Am I happy with the detail inside? I'm going to say yes to this leaf. I'm going to go on to the other red small one. Some of you may be far ahead of me. I have 3 leaves. We all have different amounts of leaves happening and different colors. So just follow and go at your own speed based on where you're at. This one I'm just going to outline first. And you can see how this darker red is adding a nice shading. And it's a really thin coat, adding a nice shade to these leaves. It's really standing out from that contrasting background. And again, I'm being mindful of how much paint is on my brush as I do some of these veins, left and right, alternating as they work down and in. There's 5 points, so I have 5 liter kind of veins coming in. And I'm so glad that we planned that initially, because it really allows the natural part of these leaves to come out. It's a big part. That's what grows these leaves. It's what helps hold their shape. It's really quite fun. Okay, I think that leaf is like pretty close to being done. I'm just going to let that dry, and I'm going to flip it. So this is where our scene is like magically coming to life. Look at the detail work on those leaves. So beautiful. I'm personally so happy with it. You can see that the leaves are a little lighter behind, and that's where the water texture really came in and was really quite helpful. There are areas where we can add shading on the underside of the leaves. If you wanted to try some of that with me, you can. Since I have red paint on this brush, I'm going to add just a little bit of black to my brush and just mix a little bit of a dark blood red, I guess, over here. And I'm going to add a little bit of water to it. So I'm making kind of a water wash. Ooh, look at that. So it's going to be less opacity. And I'm going to use this for shading near some of these red leaves. Now, if you don't want to do this, you don't have to, but I'm going to do it just to show you the difference that it makes. I do want this more watery, so I'm just going to take one more dollop of water from my water cup and just adding it right into this. So you can see it's nice and loose. Now I want to be mindful of how much water is on this brush. Now where I'm going to put this is on underneath some of these. So just on the side, I'm just going to add a little bit of this color. I'm just going to rub it in with my finger just a little bit. In the picture, it's a lot darker, so I might add a little bit more black. Now, if you don't like this, you can paint over it. You can kind of tuck in a little bit of shading on the edge, on the exterior of the red. And if it's watery enough, which this is not really watery, I'm going to add a little bit more water to my brush. I'm just going to move it around a little bit. See that? It's creating just a little bit of shading. If you don't want to do this, you don't have to. It's just a little bit of water. It's quite a bit of water, actually. Bring it a little closer so you can see it. So it's just a little bit here. So I'm just tucking, it's a little bit of a dark contrast. I'm going to make a little darker It might be a little scary for some of you, but don't worry. I'm happy to be the guinea pig to show you what it looks like so you can make some choices. See, I'm outlining kind of the edge of this. See how it's really starting to stand out? Maybe a little bit, just on the edge of some of these. See, it's creating a little shading. Do the same over here. We're looking up and down. Just a little bit of shading on the edge. Now I'm going to add a little water to that to kind of dissipate it a little bit. And you don't want this to drip at this point, so be really mindful of how much water is on your brush. But while this is wet, I'm going to move it around. And see how it softened it a little bit? So that's optional. If you want to do that, you can. If you don't like something, you probably can wipe it off really quick. But that's what that looks like. Since I did it for some of these, I'm going to go down and I'm going to add it for some of the others. But that's the kind of 3D look you get if you add a little bit of this. For me, it looks like it's like a watery, dark purplish black. The more water, the better here. But I mean, not too much, but you can see what I got going on here. It's like a dark purple that it happened to be, that it actually looks fairly decent. And I'm just going to do a little bit more. So I'm just going to follow some of the edges just on some of these to add a little bit of this. And I'm going to get a little bit more water and use just water on your brush to kind of move it out and around. If your canvas is tilted, the water may drip. So just be mindful of that. That's why I'm kind of being really careful with how much water I have and where. So there's just a little bit of shading. You can experiment with this. I'm not going to do any more for that one. This is really dark on the underside here. I don't hate it, but I need to make it look even. So that's a little darker. Again, these are the details that people can spend hours on, right? For these paintings to make them look real, like real, really real. So you can play with that. I'm doing a little bit of a dark outline on the outside of the red too. That's really making these stand out. So I'm doing a little bit of like a dark purple and black outline in addition to the watering. Again, this is like crazy 3D effect compared to just a flat image. If you want to just do the flat, you can just do the flat. I'm going to add a little bit of this in since I did it in some other areas just to make it look natural. So I'm just going to pop down here to this leaf. See how I just did a little bit of the dark edging on just one side? I'm going to do the same thing on the next edge over. See that? Just a little bit of the shading. You don't even need to do like the watery look if you don't want to. But I'm doing it on the outside of the dark red edge. So it's up to you on how dark and contrast you want to play with it. I'm just going to do a little bit of the pocket in here. Maybe a little bit on the inside of the stem. Be careful with how much water is on your brush. But I'm just going to do a little bit of finger smudging just to kind of soften some of this darkness. I'm being a little crazy here. If you don't want to be this risky, you don't have to. I'm just using the tip of my finger, just kind of smudging this in just a little bit to add a little bit of shading, a little bit of that faint shadow. See that? I'm just using my finger to smudge it just a little bit. Totally optional, a little experimentative, but I just did a little swipe of paint and then I'm smudging it and just doing some dabs with my finger. So I'm not going to do any more than that, but you can see the differences. This again is flat. It has none of the extra dark edging, but these two have a little bit more. So I'm just going to pick one edge, do a little bit of dark outlining. And I know we just did this with the red outlining, but this is like a little bit of extra shadows just along one edge. You can see it already makes a big difference. And I'm going to do this is like the right edge of these leaves, right? So I'm just going to do a little bit more. That's really crazy contrast down here. It's a nice dark purple. I'm going to do the same thing down here on the right edge of the leaf. This is a dark purple color. That's what happened to be. Bring this down a little bit. If you need to make it a little darker, add a little bit more black. That's when you get the real crazy contrast. I just added a little bit more black down here. Look how dark it just got. Crazy. All right, and I'm going to pick the right side of this leaf over here. There's that. I'll do one more over here, and then I'll go through with a little bit of like a water smudge for a little extra shadow. Again, I want these to match. So just whatever you decide to do, just try to get them all to match together. And I'm going to do a little bit of contrast down here on the underside of the leaf. And then with a little extra water on my brush, again, kind of breaking up the, use my finger just to smudge this edge to give it a little bit of a shadow. So I just do a little bit of a line and I smudge it with my finger. You can kind of use a clean finger to kind of clean up the smudge. It's kind of silly, but play with it a little bit. It's really easy once you play with that technique. So it's kind of like the dark purple line that you put in. It doesn't really go away, but the new smudged line, you get a clean finger and you can kind of smudge around it. It will clean it up, but you can see it gives you that nice 3D effect. It's like a subtle shadow, I guess is a way of putting it. This like extra smudge. Use a clean finger. You could also use a little water on your brush. Okay. I hope everyone's enjoying this so far. We're doing great with our leaves. We're going to shift to our coffee in a minute. Also, if you have secondary leaf work to do, you can do some secondary leaf work for these like orangey leaves. Right. Lots of detail on these leaves. We don't typically go do in this much detail for these leaves. So if you are done with this step, you can fast forward to the next part. But if you're playing with us, continue to play for these details. I welcome you to play as long as you wish. The classes that I teach are typically an hour and a half to 2 hours. So we're doing great with time. But I'm really happy with the detail work we did on these leaves. We don't always spend that much time on detail work, but I think it's really fun just to kind of slow down and be a little playful with these details every once in a while. So I hope that you enjoyed that. I'm just going to do a little bit of detail work with these other leaves that I have. There's not so many, so it's not going to take as long, but I'm going to use like, I have a little bit of orange right here. So I'm just going to take a little bit of my red and just make my orange like a little bit more of like a blood orange color, just so they stands out just a touch. Let's see. I want it to make it a little darker, so I want it to stand out. So it's just finding the right color, really. And I might just start somewhere. Let's see. I definitely want it to be dark enough. Let's see what this pink does. I don't know. So I'm just going to do a little bit of an outline for the orange. This might work. And I just do the vein down. So I need to be a little bit more orangey. It's a little pink right now, but I'm just going to add a little bit more orange and hope for the best here. All right. Now the natural color for these leaves is probably like more of a brown, but I'm just gonna kind of roll with it right now. I think this looks fine. You can see the detailed work. Just gonna use the same color and do the same detailed work for these down here. I'm gonna flip my picture upside down and this is like a pinky orange color, and I'm spinning the brush to really manage how much paint is on the end of it. I also use my pinky for stability. I'm outlining each of these leaves to start, just like I did with the red maple leaves. I'm going to outline each of these because I want them to stand out as their own entities. I have a lot of little ones layered in here. There we go. Now if you wanted to make these more yellowy, you can. I'm happy with like this yellow orange kind of color that I came up with. But this is where you can make modifications to these leaves, just like you did for the red. If you did any secondary leaves like me, you can come in and make some changes to the colors. It doesn't matter. They definitely look a lot different than the other ones, but it's okay. I may add like little punches of yellow here and there just to like bring them to like make them a little bit brighter. So I'm just tucking in a little bit yellow here and there. And these are all like final touches that you can do even after you're done some of these other steps, but feel free to do it whenever you want. But it's just saying, okay, am I happy with the color of these leaves? Do I want to make them, do I want to change the color, etc. Okay, so I'm going to finish the veins for these little yellow leaves. Yellow and orange, they're mainly orange. And I'm going to let them dry. I am going to make them a little more like yellowy, but I'm just going to let them dry. And I am going to add a little bit of shading. I'm going to go back to this like purple again, this dark purple. I'm going to add a little water on my brush. I'm going to see what happens if I use this color for a little bit of the shading, just like I did for the other. This is not as dark, but I may want to make it as dark. So it's kind of fun. I'm adding a little bit more black to see what happens here. Because I like the contrast. Maybe I'll do a little bit of an outline on the cup over here. I'm not going to do too much on the cup because we have a lot of work to do there. Not a lot, but enough. I'm just going to do a little bit of a darker outline on the purple. This just really starts to make some of these objects pop. I'm going to add a little water. I'm going to do the same smudging situation with my finger just to really, I want these to all match as much as possible. So I'm doing a little bit of a sweep and I'm going to do a little bit of a smudge with my finger. If you don't like this, again, you don't have to do it. This is acrylic paint and this is pigment, so you can easily like find a clean finger, find a clean paper towel, and you can kind of like make some modifications along the way. Like if I don't like that point, I can kind of just wipe it off a little bit. Okay, so you can see how things are starting to come to life a little bit. I'm not incredibly happy with the edge of that one, so I'm just going to dip my paper towel in a little bit of water and watch this. I can kind of wipe it away a little bit. Put a little pressure. Since this purple is on top of the background color, it will come off a little bit. So you can kind of manage, do some control changes. So you see I just softened that a little bit. All right. So you can just know that you can kind of change things as you go. It's all good. For me, a little bit of this shading is good. I don't typically go like this crazy, but it's kind of fun just to kind of see what happens. All right. I'm just going to tuck in a little bit in here. This is kind of a shaded area in here. This is kind of a nice natural place for it to happen. And then maybe I'll just do a little bit of extra shading down here on the underside of this stem. Maybe on the outside of this cup, I'll have just like a little bit of shading. This is where you can kind of be playful with the details. So maybe if this purple is working for me and I want to do a little bit of shading just around the outside of the cup, I could do that if I wanted to. Again, I'm experimenting at this point just to show you what it's like by adding a little bit of extra kind of subtle shading around an object. And this will really start to make the cup stand out too. So I'm using my finger to add a little bit of shading around the cup. And we haven't even done any of the cup work yet. So this is just like a little bit of a bonus shaded technique around the cup. So if you just do a little stripe of this watery purple, use your finger. Don't touch the cup at all. Just gonna go like a ½ inch outside of the cup. Getting a little fancy here. See that? It kind of gave like a little bit of a ring to the outside. If you want to do the same around the handle a little bit, a little bonus shade around the handle. Stay away from the white, just go around it. Make sure it's blended in with your finger. You can see it kind of just brought the cup out a little bit. Okay, I'm gonna let everything dry and we're gonna focus on the exterior of the cup. We're gonna use a little bit of a light blue and then we're gonna do a fine touch with white and then we'll do the white swirl inside, okay? Perfect. Again, if you're loving this class, be sure to just hit the love or the like button below. If you're not yet supporting our YouTube channel, please hit the like and subscribe button. It just helps create awareness of our art classes to other people. So I appreciate that so much. All right, so I'm gonna let my leaves dry. I'm not entirely done with them, but I'm gonna let them dry. We're going to add a little bit of fresh white to our palette. And we're going to do some white detailed work. We're going to make a really light blue to do some shaded work for our cup. And then we're going to do some white touch work on our cup. So I'm going to use just a nice small brush. And I have some white right here. And I need you to have some fresh white for like one of our final steps. But I just need you to have a little bit of light blue for this next step. So I just grabbed a little bit of white right here and I'm just going to grab a tiny touch of blue and I want you to make a very soft, subtle light blue with me. Now if you're not ready for this, feel free to pause the video and join when you're ready. But I'm making a very soft, subtle light blue. And this is going to be helpful for the interior of the cup and the handle, etc. So you can decide how soft and subtle you want this to be. You definitely want it to make it, you don't want it to be too white where you can't see the white accents. So I just added a little bit more blue and you can see it's a little bit more light blue now. If this is too dark, I can always add white to it, but at least it's different. So this is the white and the light blue next to each other. Those are good visual contrasts differences. That's kind of what you're going for, because we're going to use the white, plain white, as a touch-up detail. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to flip my canvas the right way. There we go. And we're going to create some shaded spots and some lighter spots. So on the underside of our cup, on this bottom right side, this is where some light is coming in. So what we're going to do first is we're going to start on this upper right side and we're going to outline the cup, but we're doing the interior side. So kind of like where the coffee is hitting the cup. You're going to do a nice outline all the way. And you can't really mess this part up. So you can just you can paint almost all the way to the edge with light blue. This is shading. And if you wanted to go all the way to the edge, that's okay. But we're just gonna slowly, like kind of for painting like a crested moon, we're just gonna kind of go halfway down, halfway around with this light blue. And you can see this is the shaded part of the cuff. And maybe we'll just do a little bit of outlining, and we're doing just around the coffee part right now. And there's a lot of different ways to tackle painting this, but the blue just gives us a little bit of shading. So as you kind of get halfway around, you can kind of flip to the top side of the cup. And you can kind of do the upper edge. So we're kind of shifting, and I'll bring this a little closer. We're kind of shifting from the interior to the exterior. So this is just something you can play with. And this bottom area down here is going to be, this edge on the bottom left is actually going to be more white. So I'm actually not going to paint a ton of white there. But you can just play with how much blue you add here and there. So you could do a little blue outlining over here. Just kind of lean back in your chair and play with these details. And then what we'll do is we'll come in with some white. The underside of the handle is blue, but the top side of the handle is white. So the light blue is really a fun shaded element. And then you can use white to kind of fill in all the other areas. So if you can see your pencil line, so the white is the rim on the exterior in different parts, but it's going to change as you go around the cup. So just, you could really do this in lots of different ways, but play with where you have blues and whites. Okay, but around the whole edge it's going to be white primarily. So you're going to come back in with white and you're going to do a nice clean white edge. So the blue is really there just to kind of help show a little shadow. See, I'm coming back in with a little bit of white here, and you can play with this. Take your time. You might want to come in, maybe let this dry. I don't really want these to blend too much. That white edge is really important. But you can see it's really just creating some grounding for our cup. We're also going to do an exterior shadow. So play with your blues and your whites here. We're going to let it dry. We'll come back to it. Sometimes the colors will get a little mucky, like the blues will blend in with the whites. It's okay. But we need a little bit of edging, right? A little bit of dark edging for this cup. And we could just use the same color that we used before, like a dark purpley, maybe with a little bit of black, but you want that to be watered down. So the same edging color that you used for the leaves, we're going to use just to outline the cup, and that's really going to make the cup stand out. So I have this dark purple. So you can see I have a little bit of blues. That's good. But I'm going to outline slowly using a thin brush the exterior of the cup, and this is what's going to make the cup stand out. In this part, you want to take your time. You want to try to follow that edge. That initial edge. Don't forget to breathe. You're having fun. You can turn your canvas. Look at that. Turn it. If your pinky is dry and the center is dry, you can put your pinky on the interior. I'm using a tiny brush. And you can see my cup is starting to come off my canvas, which is great. I'm going to turn it one more time because I have to do an outline up here. It's okay to spin your canvas for you in instances like this. Sometimes we don't have the ability to like walk around a table kind of thing. If you wanted to do an outline around the coffee, doing a dark line, that will also add thin shading. All the details in this class, all for consideration. Just using a little bit of paint on my brush, using the edge. I'm going to spin this again. And I can't wait to do this swirl. This is what I've been waiting for my whole life. So I'm just going around and around and around and around. I think I got everywhere. Nope, I got one more little spot. All right, so I did the exterior, I did the interior. I'm also gonna outline the handle here. You might need to mix more paint. I have just enough. And there's kind of like a lower lip of the handle too, where it's a little bit more shaded here. I'm gonna add a little bit of water to my brush. I'm stretching my paint here, aka I don't have a ton of it left, so I'm just stretching it with a little bit of water, which is really helpful. Okay. Now I'm inspired to add in a little bit of the smudging around, just a little bit, maybe here by the handle, just for the shaded look. Remember, we did that a little bit of the smudging. I want a little bit more. So this is a personal choice of like how much shading of this like smudging situation you do around your mug. It will help it stand out. You can add a little more shading in different areas, right? You see that? A little more water. This paint pigment can kind of blend in a little bit. So this is where you can really get a little artistic with what you want to do for your shaded elements. Now this shaded technique is perfect for some of the fabric texture that we built in. So I'm going to get a little creative here and just show you a few things. Where we have these lines, I'm just going to do a line of this watery purple, and I'm going to use my finger to just kind of smudge this in. I'm going to use a little more water on my brush and just do some gentle smudging just to kind of create a little bit of texture. Now, if you don't like that, if it's too dark, you can easily grab like a little bit of white, a little bit of yellow, and just kind of go over it really quick. Okay, you could take white on your finger, white on your canvas, and just kind of go over it to soften it. These are all choices that you can make around like how you want to play with like this texturing. I kind of like it, so you can look and make some choices around like, do you want to add some of this darker layering or not? For me, I actually personally like it without it. And this is, again, me experimenting, so I'm glad that I'm doing this. So I'm just going to take white, and look at this. I can paint white right on top of it. Look at, and I'm covering it right up. Totally fine. Totally fine. I'm using my finger to kind of blend it in. All good. Okay. And if I wanted to get some of that orangey yellow again to kind of help blend this in and cover up some of the purple, I can absolutely do that. So it's up to you on how you want to like add some, if you want to play with the areas or not, like these lines. I might just leave them for right now as we do our swirl, and I'll kind of think about what I want to do. But I kind of like that it's nice and light personally. So you can see I just added a nice white line. It's okay to try and think about new things, all good. But I do like the shaded bit around the cup. I'm going to add a little bit more of that, and then we'll do the swirl inside together. There's a lot of different ways you can add texture to this exterior, but I'm just going to do some of this shading and stay focused for the rest of class here. So I'm just going to do a little bit of this purple shading, and I'm just going to use my finger and just kind of like work it up and around. That I'm just creating, and this is, my finger's fairly clean, and I'm just doing some smudging. You can get a little bit more water on your brush if you want to extend it. Use your eye, do as much or as little of this as you want to, right? I'm going to do a little bit in here. So I'm using my eye visually. Where else do I need to add a little bit of this purple smudging? My finger's really wet, so it's leaving like little finger marks, which is okay. But there, I just made it a little darker down here. And kind of going right around this leaf. You don't have to use your finger, you can just use your brush as well. So in this instance down here, I'm just playing with my brush strokes. You can even come back around this a little bit, just to kind of show that this is white again. If I wanted to just use this to just kind of come in between these a little bit, I can. Anything goes, okay? So that's just a little bit of a detailed work there. You could take a little bit of this and with a little water, I think this is what I was trying to do before, just doing like a little swipe with just like a little bit of a darker smudge to kind of create some shading. I think mine was just too dark before. Kind of coming down. See, I'm just creating a little bit of subtle shading with some of the shifts. You could do that. So I'm going to try a little bit of that. I think it's, if it's light enough, you're in good shape. See, I'm just adding a little bit of like that wave. That's really starting to tie it all together. This is really getting a little artsy though, so some of you are probably like, Megan, I'm good. It's okay if you don't want to do this, but I'm just showing you ways of kind of tying your background together with and highlighting some of these separated areas. I just do a little, and the water is like really crucial here to soften the paint pigment. See that? Just create a little bit of a shade to that shape. I'm just going to do a little bit more here. Maybe I'll come off, but I just need a little bit of water to help move that around. And I'm just using my brush to kind of soften that. And then I'm personally using my finger just to kind of shade that in. And you can kind of play with the shapes that you create here. So maybe I'll do another one just whooshing off over here. Maybe it will go off the page. Maybe it will come down. But it's just kind of creating some fun background texture along the way. So I'm going to do a little bit more of that down here. And then I'm going to call it for the background. But it's kind of a fun way to kind of fill in your background without it being just like a flat color. So I really like some of these lines and the movement that we added. It's not like a sweater style. That it probably would have taken a much longer time to do like a sweater like style. You could actually come in here with like a pen and add some like sweater like detail. That could be really pretty. But you can do some, you can choose. You may have come up with a new texture or pattern on your own. And in these classes, I always encourage you to kind of come up with your own ideas. You can see here, at least I have some fun textures that are going on. All right, so now we're doing great for class. We're close to the 2-hour mark, and we're gonna do our pretty little fun design on the interior. So this is the moment we've been waiting for. All right, so you could do a little heart design. You wanna find the smallest brush that you have in your space, because you wanna brush with a nice fine tip. And I'm just going to put a little bit of white paint. And the trick with these designs is there's symmetry, right? So you want to kind of find the top, and for me, I'm just going to start with like a little heart, and it's just going to kind of come and pull down. All these designs are going to kind of pull down the middle a little bit. So I'm just going to come up, and these are going to be lots of little loops and little designs. Whatever you do on the left, you want to do on the right. Some of these are like long and skinny. Some may have like a little bit of a, think of like a peacock feather, just like doing little tiny designs. This one has like a little bit of a gap in it. And I'm keeping these all fairly close to the middle of the body. So this one might come up, and it might come over. And these have like these little loops in them, so it's like kind of open, and then they come back in and out. Use your imagination here. Everybody's are going to look a little different. Some of these may have like little points on the ends. Some can be loopy, some can be filled in. And then as you start getting down here, it's going to start to change a little bit. They're going to start to round around. So I'm going to start to kind of loop in. So you can decide how far down you want to come. But they're going to start to loop around one another. So watch this. I'm kind of looping it around, leaving the gap. Kind of coming up high and looping it down around, and we're creating those beautiful rings that you see. Now mine is like shifting a little bit, which is okay, so maybe I'll just even one side out. There, doesn't matter. And then maybe I'll start, and I can kind of, you're just gonna do rings kind of around and down. Maybe I'll start to recenter. There. It's okay. These are like little waves of latte, right? So these things can change. And as you start to do some of these final rings, they're going to get a little lighter. So maybe do 3 or 4 of these. I'm on the 4th. And then we're going to get lighter in color. So we're going to put a little water on our brush. And then we're going to do like a little line kind of connecting all of these two. See that? So this is our latte. You can do as much or as little as you want here. This is my first latte design, so we're all just embracing this for what it is here together. You can kind of change the shape of these, kind of have them come down a little bit if you want to. Pull them down the line on the ends, pulling them down. I'm going to make this side a little bit more even. Okay, and I'm going to do lighter colors for the last few lines. The lighter color for me is I'm just going to have a little bit more water on my brush. Maybe I'll make a little bit of a water wash. You may, if you have any of this caramel color left, you can kind of mix it with a little bit of white. Anything goes. So you're just going to have some kind of final like wispy, swirling kind of designs maybe. Maybe you just kind of do some rounded designs, like it's just kind of fading away. See how it's softer? It's softening. You just do some soft, gentle brush strokes towards the edge of the cup. Right? And then you can kind of fill in where you want. So my heart needs to be a little bit wider. You can do second coats on anywhere that you please. And this is our adorable little latte. You can kind of do some reshaping, some more roundedness. And have a little bit more roundedness in some areas. Anything goes. You could have done like a little a little like zigzag kind of thing if you wanted to. Anything works here. Some of these kind of like tuck deep down, like they kind of come in, like they're all kind of blending together, like coming down and in. Having some of these final rings are good. You can do as much or as little here as you wish. I'm going to put a little bit more water. The water will help dissipate the paint pigment. And if you do something you don't like, just know that you can always paint over it. No big deal. There we go. I needed to make one side a little higher with design. All right. The top of your handle can have like a little bit of an accent on it. If you wanted to do another quick like level 2 tip, you could do like a little bit of a lighter ring on the interior up here. You could just do a little bit of a lighter ring just to kind of like showcase the drink inside of the cup. You can go back and you can add in more light blue if you wanted to add in more light blue. These are all choices that you can make. The other thing, as one final tip, is if you wanted to do like a really clean white ring around the top of your coffee mug, that will really help the edge of the coffee mug stand out. So like on the interior of the darker line, but kind of on the edge, you can see up here it looks really clear. A nice clean white line. If you have any light blue, if you need the edge of your coffee cup to stand out, just add a little bit of a white line and it will make it stand right out. So the light blue is your shadow. So anywhere you need a little bit more shading, maybe you need a little bit of a darker blue, you can play with that. Adding in a little bit of a darker blue may be helpful for you. You can play with some of those details. But I want to thank you so much for being here today. I hope you enjoyed the class. I'm just going to smudge this in really quick. There we go. Add a little bit of more of a blue edging for things to stand out a little bit more. But take your time, do any of your final techniques and detailed work. Do a little bit of edging work right here. I just painted over that. Perfect. Well, I want to thank you so much for being here today. Feel free to take as much time as you need to kind of work on your refinements. But I hope you love this. I thought it came out really cute, really fun. If you wanted to add any extra contrast to really ground your cup, you could absolutely do that. I probably will go in and add another second coat of white paint to the latte design. But I want to thank you for being here. If you have any questions, please post them below. If you loved this, I'd love to hear your feedback. Be sure to like and give a little love to this video if you see it. Thank you so much for being here, and I look forward to seeing your artwork. Cheers.